No secret that the country has a serious debt problem. Experts believe South Africa's debt trajectory could reach a fiscal cliff if not addressed. Daouda Sembene, who's Catalyst founder and CEO, joins us this morning to unpack how the debt problem can be sustainably addressed. A very good morning to you, Daouda, and thank you for your time. I mean, I've just mentioned it to my colleagues that the debt problem is not a problem that is exclusive to South Africa. It's something that we see continent-wide. But if we take a look at South Africa and where we are at the moment, how do you come back from this fiscal cliff?
Well, thank you for having me. I think, yes, you're perfectly right. The debt crisis is not hitting only South Africa. It is hitting a number of countries, not only in Africa, but around the world. You may have heard that as of now, there are more than 3 billion people who live in countries that are paying more, and that are allocating more resources paying their debt than on other priority expenses like expenditure, like health, like education, like infrastructure. So yes, this is a big issue. And how do you come back from a debt crisis? I think there are many ways, but the reality is we just came up with a new report that was commissioned by the Vatican, and that was trying to look at the crisis of debt and development. And our main recommendation that is you have to make sure that when a country is facing a debt crisis, that it doesn't spend more time, more resources servicing external creditors than it is actually receiving new resources to help with its priorities.
Yeah, I mean, the report talks quite interestingly about improving debt restructuring. How would we do that?
Yes, I think what the report has found is that when there is a crisis of debt, countries that are in debt distress usually experience what is called capital flight. It means that there is more resources that are coming out from those countries to the rest of the world. Actually, what you want is to have the opposite. When a country is very much affected by a debt crisis, it should be able to receive more money than it is actually sending abroad. And I think this is one key issue. But it also means that when a country is really in debt crisis, it also should have the opportunity to what we call restructure its debt. It means that making sure that its debt is becoming more affordable so that they can reduce what they're allocating in terms of debt repayment so that they can free money for other purposes. So what we also found was that if there is a debt crisis, it's not only the financial default that needs to be looked at, but also the fact that moral and social failure from those countries to meet the priority needs of their population, and that needs to be addressed.
What also needs to be addressed, and this is also cited in the report, Daouda, is the fact that lending institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, need to change their policies to ensure that there is a sustainable form of debt management within these countries. But what policies would need to change?
Yeah, you're perfectly right. What we have seen in our report is that there is what is called a shared responsibility for the debt crisis. Of course, it starts with the debtor countries that borrow more than they could afford to. It also involves what we call the irresponsible creditors that knew that when they were lending, there was a risk that there would be a default. But of course, it also involved the international financial institutions like the IMF, the World Bank that you talked about. Those institutions have sometimes flow policies that contribute to aggravating the risk due to debt sustainability. It means that they need to address those policies. One such policy is what is called the austerity plans. That tendency to, of course, when you want to resolve economic crisis in a country, to ask the country to cut its budget or its expenditure on priority spending. What we have seen is usually it is associated with the problem to bolster growth, which is actually a key issue. If you are in a debt crisis and you are not growing, chances are your debt crisis will worsen. So that's a problem that international financial institutions like the IMF needs to address. One other issue that is also important is we recommended that the IMF or other institutions do not spend more time bailing out private creditors during the crisis than it is now the case.
And then there's also a conversation that needs to be had around changing the global financing models, reimagining global financing. How do you do that? I mean, the state of many countries, especially emerging market economies, is quite dire, Daouda. So, one would imagine this would be a challenging.
Yes, it is challenging, but it is doable because the reality is right now the global financial system is not helping countries that are experiencing debt crisis. So what we have seen is the global financial system is contributing to aggravating those risks that are being faced by countries in debt crisis. So you need to reform it, and it is good that in Seville, where I am right now, as part of the Financing for Development Conference, this is something that is on the table of the discussion that are being held by global head of states. So that's a big issue that we felt it needed to be addressed. You can do it in many ways. It means that you need to reform the way multilateral development banks like the World Bank are working. You also need to reform the global economic governance. You also need to make sure that countries that are in the global south, developing countries, can have access to more financing at affordable rates, but also in a timely manner and in an adequate level. So all of that needs to be done, and I think there is a big momentum for that to be done. Unfortunately, of course, there are some problems that are making it more difficult, but this is doable. Yeah.